When you walk up to a pane of glass in a high-rise building, you essentially have this choice to make about how your brain processes the light.
Right. It's like a subconscious decision.
Exactly. Like if the conditions are right, you look straight through that glass, you take in the cityscape, the traffic miles below, the weather rolling in, you see the actual world existing independently on the other side.
Yeah, you're observing an external reality.
Right. But, if you shift your focal length just a fraction of an inch, letting your eyes catch the surface of the pane instead of looking past it, the entire world outside just vanishes.
It's completely gone.
Suddenly, you aren't observing a landscape at all. You're just staring at your own reflection, kind of superimposed over this blurry, irrelevant background.
Which is such a wild optical illusion, but we totally control it. And what's truly fascinating is how that exact same mechanism applies to, the way we consume information.
Oh, absolutely.
You think you're engaging with a piece of art or a historical text, but with the slightest psychological shift, you stop observing the material and you just start looking at yourself.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that tension between looking through the glass and looking at your own reflection is the exact phenomenon we are tearing in.
It really is the core of what we're looking at.
We have this fascinating stack of sources that are honestly going to fundamentally challenge how you consume media, literature, and even just your daily newsfeed.
Yeah, we're working primarily from this really comprehensive titled The Burden of Context, a critique of political overreach.
Right. And along with that, there's this very brief but incredibly sharp follow-up note called The Undelivered Lessons of Daniel.
And we really should set the parameters of this deep dive immediately.
Yeah, that's crucial.
Because the source material dives headfirst into some of the most highly charged political waters imaginable. The text we are analyzing explicitly debates how a specific content creator, Daniel Greene, brings figures like Donald Trump, Charlie Kirk, and Benjamin Netanyahu into his literary reviews.
Right, which, instantly raises the temperature.
Exactly. So, considering the state of modern discourse, it is vital to establish right now that we are not here to litigate the politicians themselves.
No, not at all.
We are not endorsing, condemning, or validating any left-wing or right-wing perspectives today. That is absolutely not the goal.
Not even a little bit. We are entirely focused on the mechanics of the critique itself. We're looking at the arguments made within the text about how this reviewer interprets a book.
Right. It's about the methodology of reading.
Exactly. We are essentially placing the whole framework of modern media consumption under a microscope. It's a debate about the friction between what an author historically intended to say and what a modern reader, desperately wants the book to be about.
And that friction, that's the beating heart of the burden of content. The author of our source text is issuing this systemic rebuttal to a video review published by Greene.
Right.
And to really grasp the scope of this rebuttal, we have to look at the bedrock of the book that Greene was actually reviewing.
So what is the book actually about, according to the source?
Well, according to the source text, this book is fundamentally a criticism of the Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin. It is a deep historical exploration of the absolute nature of totalitarianism.
Okay, but the source text argues that Daniel Greene essentially ignores that bedrock, right?
Completely ignores it. The central thesis of the critique is that Greene takes this profound historical exploration of Stalinism and just aggressively forces a modern American political template.
Wow.
Yeah, the critique argues that Greene isn't just missing the historical nuances, he is actively weakening the original vital message of the story by trying to make it fit today's headlines.
Which brings us right back to that pane of glass. It's like looking at a window and deciding to use it exclusively as a mirror.
That's the perfect way to look at it.
Instead of looking through the book to see the brutal history the author is actually pointing at, like the complex machinery of Stalinist Russia, the reviewer is just looking at the surface of the text and seeing his own modern political anxieties reflected back at him.
And when you use a book as a mirror like that, the historical reality outside gets completely blocked out. You stop reading to learn about the past, and you just start reading to find, validation for your current worldview.
So as we dive into this, I want you to consider your own habits for a moment. Think about the last time you read a classic dystopian novel or watched a sci-fi series with a political slant.
Right, something with heavy theme.
How quickly did your brain try to map those fictional characters onto today's politicians? How fast did you say, oh, this fictional crisis is exactly what's happening in Washington?
We all do it.
We do. But the big question our source text poses is whether that instinct is just a natural human attempt to make art relatable, or, and this is the heavy part, if it is actually a massive disservice to the art itself.
And to understand the source text's sheer frustration with this instinct, we really have to look at the specific historical parallels the author is dismantling.
Right, because they get very specific.
They do. The critique is incredibly alarmed by what it identifies as a dangerous historical false equivalence.
Yeah, the source text takes direct aim at Greene for comparing the Stalinist regime depicted in the book to the modern American political landscape.
It's a huge leap.
It really is. The author practically grabs the reader by the shoulders to say, modern America is not Stalinist Russia.
And the text goes far beyond just stating that as a matter of opinion, you know? It rigorously defines the actual boundaries of totalitarianism.
Right. It lays down the criteria.
Exactly. According to the critique, the comparison fails because it fundamentally misunderstands the mechanism of a true Stalinist state.
How so?
Well, in a genuinely totalitarian regime, the defining characteristic isn't just that the government is flawed or, corrupt. It is the absolute violent suppression of dissent.
Meaning you can't push back.
Right. It means a citizen cannot openly criticize the government, cannot express opposing opinion, and certainly cannot publish critical media without facing the immediate, terrifying reality of imprisonment, torture, or
Let me push back on that, though, because I think a lot of people listening might actually share Greene's instinct here.
Okay, let's hear it.
I mean, isn't it the job of a cultural critic or even just an engaged reader to point out red flag? Why does a society have to literally be a gulag before we are allowed to use classic literature as a cautionary tale?
That's a fair question.
Right. If a reviewer sees early warning signs in modern politics, shouldn't they use the extreme examples in literature to say, hey, we need to course correct before we end up like...
Well, what's fascinating here is how specifically the source text anticipates that exact defense, that whole idea of the caution.
Oh, really? They address that?
They do. The critique implies that this kind of hyperbole doesn't actually serve as a warning. It actively degrades our understanding of history.
How does it degrade it?
By casually equating a society that allows massive public dissent with a society that historically crushed, we lose all sense of scale. We lose the gravity of true totalitarianism.
Ah, I see. So you're saying the exaggeration actually dulls the blade of the warning.
Precisely. The text points to a massive, undeniable irony here. The very fact that a content creator can comfortably sit in a studio, freely criticize national leaders on a public platform, and broadcast that critique to a global audience without fear of a secret knocker
is proof they don't live in a totalitarian state.
Exactly. It's empirical proof that they do not live in the society they are claiming to live in.
That is a staggering point. It's like trying to use a historical map of a war zone to navigate a modern subway system.
That's a great analogy.
You might find a few streets that share the same name, but you are fundamentally misunderstanding the terrain you're standing on. And if you call everything a war zone, you have no vocabulary left for when the bombs actually start falling.
And that's exactly it. The source text argues that this lack of vocabulary cheapens the historical reality of the million people who actually suffered and died under Stalin. When words like totalitarian are thrown around as casual hyperbole for policies I dislike, the historical weight of the word just evaporates.
So building on that idea of false equivalence, the source text shows how this problem kind of bleeds out from the setting of the book and starts infecting how the reviewer views the characters themselves.
Right. It doesn't stop at the world building.
No, it doesn't. Because the critique notes that as the review progresses, at specific timestamps like 9.01 and 19.55, Greene starts explicitly connecting the authoritarian, villainous figures in the text to modern politicians.
And specifically naming Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu.
Right. And the author's rebuttal to these connections is very methodical.
It is. The critique states that these comparisons are entirely unsupported by the actual text.
So they're just pulled out of thin air.
Pretty much. The argument being made is that simply having a strong distaste for a politician, or even harboring a sincere belief that their administration is actively harmful, does not magically transform them into a literary equivalent of a historical dictator.
The source text lays down a very strict mandate here. It insists that political criticism, especially when tied to literary analysis, must be based on specific actions, verified evidence, and clear contextual alignment.
Not just personal animosity.
Exactly. You can't just say, well, the authoritarian in this book is loud and demands loyalty, and this modern politician is loud and demands loyalty. Therefore, the author is essentially writing about this politician.
Because that's just lazy analysis.
Right.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the source text is essentially diagnosing a massive cognitive bias that has completely hijacked modern media.
The confirmation bias, right?
Yes. The author accuses the reviewer of using this profoundly complex piece of literature merely as a convenient framework to attack people they already oppose before they even opened the book.
It is a textbook manifestation of confirmation bias.
Absolutely.
But I think we hear the term confirmation bias is thrown around a lot. How does it actually operate in this specific context of, reading a novel?
Well, confirmation bias is our brain's tendency to aggressively search for, interpret and favor information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs while simultaneously ignoring anything that contradicts them.
Right.
So when applied to literature, it's incredibly destructive. If a reader approaches a book about authoritarianism while carrying a heavy load of modern political angst, their brain stops absorbing the narrative.
It stops being a story.
Exactly. Instead, it turns into a search. It actively scans the text, looking for any vague similarity, any out-of-context quote that can be weaponized against their real-world political.
So they aren't engaging with the author's exploration of Stalinism at all. They're just strip mining the text for ammunition.
Strip mining is the perfect analogy. And the danger, according to the critique, is that this methodology hollows out class.
It ruins it.
Yeah, the actual historical context, the thematic depth, the nuanced warnings the author intended to convey, all of it is excavated and thrown away.
Leaving behind what? A hollow shell?
Exactly. A hollow shell that the reviewer just fills with today's trendy political talking point. Art becomes nothing more than a prop for modern Greene.
Which perfectly sets up the next major issue the source text tackles. Because the author doesn't just defend the historical integrity of politicians from these sweeping comparisons.
No, it shifts gears in a really interesting way.
Yeah, the critique takes a fascinating turn to defend modern political commentators from assumptions about their internal motives.
Right. Yes, the text zeroes in on a moment around timestamp 14.38, where the reviewer turns their attention to the conservative commentator Charlie Kirk.
And what happened there?
Greene casually labels Kirk as a manipulator, and the author of our source text draws a massive, heavy line in the sand regarding this specific word.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The critique essentially accuses the reviewer of trying to read minds. The source text argues that you are completely free to disagree with someone's political opinion. You can believe their policies are deeply flawed, factually incorrect, or even harmful to the social fabric. But labeling someone a manipulator crosses a massive intellectual boundary.
It changes the accusation entirely. Because to call someone a manipulator, you have to prove bad faith.
You have to know their intentions.
Exactly. You have to prove that they do not actually believe the words coming out of their own mouth and that they are purposely deceiving their audience for some hidden, cynical motive.
Which is almost impossible to prove.
Right. And the source text pushes back hard, pointing out that many people view figures like Kirk as individuals who genuinely, fervently believe in the political ideologies they champion in the public square.
I want to pause here because this is so relevant to how all of us really scroll through our feeds every single day.
It's an everyday occurrence now.
Think about your own internal monologue. When you see a clip of a pundit or a politician you absolutely cannot stand, how fast is the leap from this person's ideas are terrible to this person is an evil mastermind who's just grifting the public?
That leap is incredibly fast. And it's because it's a psychological defense mechanism.
How so?
Well, it is so much easier and so much more comfortable to dismiss a political opponent as a cynical grifter than it is to engage with the deeply uncomfortable reality that they might genuinely believe in a view that you find abhorrent.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Because if they genuinely believe it and millions of their followers genuinely believe it, then you actually have to do the exhausting work of understanding why those ideas are resonating.
Right. You have to dismantle the argument itself.
But if they're just a manipulator, you get a free pass.
Exactly. You don't have to engage with the ideas because the ideas are just a smokescreen. You can just write off their entire character and move on.
It's the ultimate intellectual shortcut.
It really is. And the author writes, you may disagree with his opinions, but dismissing him as simply a manipulator is an unfair and inaccurate characterization.
So they're demanding better critique.
Yeah. The source text is begging the reviewer, and by extension the audience, to adopt a more rigorous, less dismissive form of critique. It demands that we stop mind-reading motives and start doing the hard work of engaging with the actual argument.
And that demand for tangible proof over lazy assumption is exactly what drives the critique into its final major argument, which revolves around how the reviewer handles the concept of wealth.
Yeah, this is where things get really convoluted.
Right, around timestamps 22.18 and 22.26. The source text points out that during the review, the discussion inexplicably pivots to focus heavily on Donald Trump's personal wealth and the income of his family members.
Which is wild. The author of the critique expresses absolute bewilderment. They are essentially asking, how did we get from a literary analysis of Soviet totalitarianism to reading someone's tax return?
It's a massive conflation. The reviewer seems to be blending the concept of financial success with the concept of systemic political corruption.
But the source text firmly rejects that formula. It states explicitly that criticizing someone's financial success is absolutely not the same thing as proving corruption or wrong.
The critique is demanding a chain of evidence. If a reviewer is going to level accusations of totalitarian-level corruption, especially while invoking a book about the devastating abuses of Stalinist Russia, they need undeniable factual evidence of a crime.
It's like assuming someone is an arsonist just because they own a lot of matches.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
Having the matches isn't a crime, it's a circumstance. Still have to prove they lit the fire.
Right. And the text is pointing out that the reviewer is substituting a generalized modern grievance about wealth inequality for actual targeted analysis of wrongdoing.
And that substitution tells us exactly where the review has derailed, at least according to the author of our source text.
It's lost the plot.
Completely. By the time the reviewer is tallying up a politician's family income, literary analysis has been completely abandoned.
The book doesn't even matter anymore.
No. The profound themes of the book, the author's carefully crafted prose, the historical context of the Soviet Union, all of it has vanished. The classic novel has been reduced to a localized, modern soap.
So if we pull back from all of these specific skirmishes, the debate over what constitutes a Stalinist state, the accusations of mind-reading motives, the tangents about wealth, what is the overarching philosophy of critique that the source text is actually trying to establish?
The source text provides a very clear, uncompromising rule book for what constitutes a valid, rigorous literary analysis.
Okay, what's the first rule?
The foundational rule is a good analysis must explain the original author's intended.
First and foremost.
That is the non-negotiable starting. A reviewer must engage with what the creator actually wrote, informed heavily by the historical context in which they wrote.
So you have to force yourself to look through the window and observe the landscape outside before you give yourself permission to check your reflection in the glass.
Exactly. The text argues that only after that solid historical and thematic foundation is laid, only after the author's original intent is thoroughly explored and respected, should a reviewer even begin to entertain a discussion about possible modern parallels.
So what does this all mean for us as consumers?
It's a big warning.
Yeah, it means the source text is issuing a profound warning against the danger of forced narrative. The author warns that we should not force the book into a political narrative that may not actually be there.
Because doing so doesn't make the book more relevant, it makes it smaller.
Oh, that's a good way to phrase it.
It shrinks a massive, historically significant work of art down to the microscopic size of whatever social media outrage is trending this week.
Which raises an important question about the current state of media consumption.
Yeah.
And I think it perfectly contextualizes the second source.
Yeah, that second source is brief, but it packs a punch.
It's just a single sentence from a follow-up note titled, The Undelivered Lessons of Daniel Greene. The sentence simply reads, I wish Daniel Greene understood this.
It is incredibly brief, but you can really feel the weight behind it.
You really can.
It carries the tone of a heavy exhaust sigh. It is a profound lament.
Like they're just tired of it all.
Exactly. It's the sound of an author who is deeply frustrated that modern public discourse has become so inescapably hyper-political. It highlights this cultural exhaustion where we can no longer even read a historical critique without an overwhelming compulsion to make it about today's 24-hour.
It's a mourning for the loss of historical context, because if every single piece of media we consume has to be run through the wood chipper of modern politics, if every book is just a secret code about the next election, then we completely sever our connection to the past.
We lose the ability to learn anything that isn't about.
We've navigated a massive philosophical landscape today based on these sources. What started as a critique of a single book review opened up a window into the structural flaws of modern commentary.
We examine the dangers of historical false equivalence, recognizing that lazily comparing modern, free society to totalitarian regime actively erases the historical reality of immense human suffering.
And we looked at the critical importance of the burden of proof, challenging our own instincts to equate wealth with corruption or, disagreement with bad faith.
We discussed the intellectual laziness of mind instead of engaging with actual argument.
And ultimately, we dissected the destructive nature of confirmation bias in literary analysis, the sheer danger of projecting our own localized anxieties onto classic art, instead of having the patience and respect to let the art speak for itself.
So as we wrap up, we want to leave you with a final lingering thought.
Something to mull over.
Right. It's a concept inspired by the deep frustration found in our source text, and it's something to challenge yourself with the next time you pick up a novel, watch a political documentary, or even just scroll through a review.
What's the question?
If we demand that every single piece of art, literature, and history must neatly map onto the political anxieties of our current moment, do we eventually lose the ability to hear the timeless warnings those authors actually intended?
That's a sobering thought.
If everything we consume is endlessly, exhaustingly about now, how can we ever learn from then?
The next time you encounter a piece of art, ask yourself, are you looking through the window to see the world the author built, or are you just staring at your own reflection? Thank you so much for exploring these ideas with us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the context of the media you consume, demand evidence over assumption, and we will see you next.